Welcome to Temperament from the Beginning, a podcast dedicated to sharing temperament information. My name is Lori Cordles, and today our guest is Rona Renner, also known as Nurse Rona. Welcome, Rona.
Hi, Lori.
So, since 1966, when Rona graduated from the Brooklyn College School of Nursing, she's been dedicated to solving problems, helping people reduce suffering, and exploring preventative approaches to disease, discomfort, and stress. Her experience in health care is quite broad, ranging from caring for newborns and their mothers to end of life care with the elderly. She worked as a staff nurse, head nurse, director of nursing, educator, executive director, radio show producer and host, and parenting coach. In 1993, Kaiser Permanente trained her as a temperament counselor while she was working as a pediatric advice nurse. With the mentorship of Dr. James Cameron and the Preventive Ounce, she went on to head the Temperament program for Kaiser Permanente in Richmond, California. She co-wrote the temperament-based parenting curriculum along with Helen Neville and Jan Crystal. It was used for classes throughout Kaiser Permanente in Northern California. Rona was the founder of the nonprofit organization Interactive Parenting Media and the host for almost 10 years of the Childhood Matters call-in radio show. She also helped to start the Nuestros Niños radio show in Spanish. She was dedicated to getting good information and inspiration to thousands of parents each week. And she talked about behavior through the lens of temperament on a regular basis. Rona has been a speaker at national conferences on children's temperament, ADHD, and other parenting concerns. She frequently presents training sessions for teachers, community-based organizations, professionals, and parents on a wide variety of topics. She consulted with doctors and teachers on learning differences in ADHD in India. Rona has been a guest expert on national television segments on CNN in 2020 and was a monthly guest for 3 years on ABC's Sevens, The View from the Bay. In 2013, her book, Is That Me Yelling?, was published. It is now in 5 other languages and is a current bestseller in China. She currently hosts a radio show on a Pacific station in Northern California, kpfa.org, where she produces and hosts the show about health. She's also working on an audio class to be published in China next year. And most importantly, Rona is the mother of 4 children and she has 5 grandchildren. So thank you again. I love reading those biographies. I appreciate all that I got to share.
Well, Lori, thank you. That's kind of fun listening to what you had to say about me. It's like, at this point in my age, in my 70s, there's a lot I've done, and I'm really grateful for all the opportunities I've had, Lori.
Oh, wonderful. So before I begin with where you started, I'd actually like to first ask, what is it about temperament that kept you in the field for over 25 years?
Understanding temperament is sort of a superpower. I've seen just how one session with parents can sometimes be just what they need to change their approach to discipline or their whole view of their child. I've seen how it calls forth compassion for themselves and for their kids. Temperament reduces blame and shame, and it's really a guiding light for challenging times for parents. And in over 25 years, I've never, ever gotten tired of teaching parents about temperament.
Isn't that true? Isn't that true? Yes. I know you just kind of want to keep sharing, right? Yes.
When someone asks me if I do a class, I always say yes. And so often in say a 90-minute class, and these are done on Zoom these days, parents tell me at the end that they understand why one of their kids is hard for them or another is easy. They understand why they're so reactive to, say, their intense child, and they see their own intensity as part of the equation. So temperament helps us understand not only our children, but ourselves better. And we can really look at what we need as parents and grandparents in order to be compassionate and be connected to our kids. So temperament was the missing piece of the puzzle for me as I was raising my kids, who were also very different. And until I was trained in temperament, I was sure I was just doing something wrong, since what I did for one child wasn't working so well with the other. And I know that parents are so grateful to have more tools to understand what's needed for their individual child.
Yes. And I love that you said, sometimes it's just one session. It is sometimes just one session. And that word compassion, um, I literally had, just my body feel warm when you said that word, because that is so true. All of a sudden, that one session leads to a little bit more compassion. And the parents suddenly realize, you know what? There's not something wrong with anyone. We just need some more understanding. Excellent. Thank you for sharing. I love those stories. And that's what we're going to talk about is stories. And so that kind of brings us right into, well, share with us, what's the beginning of Rona's story?
Well, when it comes to temperament, I was working as a pediatric advice nurse at Kaiser Permanente in Richmond, California. And I had this amazing boss, Dr. Mel Berman. And he told me there was a training program to learn to be a temperament counselor. And I had no idea what temperament was, but I was really curious and I loved the idea of being paid to go to a training. And I had been doing parenting classes on my own in private practice for many years before this. So in 1993, I attended a training by Dr. James Cameron with his organization, the Preventive Ounce, and Dr. David Rosen, who was the chief of psychiatry at Kaiser in San Rafael, California. And they had both met with and were inspired by Drs. Alexander Thomas and Dr. Stella Chess. And during following up trainings, we also had the privilege of learning directly from Chess and Thomas and being inspired by their stories and their
Wow.
research.
Oh,
So
wow.
I went to
What a
this
gift.
training. I know. I
Oh,
went to this training and I met Helen Neville and Jan Crystal and many other professionals who were then going to be disseminating this information. And I really wondered why I hadn't learned any of this before. I knew about developmental stages, but I had never heard about looking at behavior through the temperament lens. And I want to say that it changed my life as a parent of 4 kids, two of them who were very spirited.
yes.
And it also changed my career as a nurse in very, very profound ways. I'll tell you about my first client. I was at Kaiser in Richmond. The pediatrician called me and said, there's this patient who keeps coming in with her kids for minor issues, like really colds and other minor issues. And he thought that maybe there was more to her visits than was meeting the eye. And he asked me to do a temperament assessment now that I was trained, and that maybe I could see what help she needed. And I remember having her fill out the questionnaire, which was already useful, just filling out the questionnaire. And I had an hour appointment with her, and that made her cry, just knowing that I could spend a whole hour with her. And she was struggling with a lot of things. And the temperament traits of her children became a good place to start. I was able to give her some anticipatory guidance and support her in the work she was doing as a mom. And then we uncovered deeper issues. I was able to refer her to the mental health department, where she then received therapy for herself.
Oh,
And over the next 6 months, her visits to the pediatrician really diminished. I think she didn't come back to see him, actually.
wow.
And she made some real significant changes in her life and came back to see me years later to say how much that temperament intervention helped her shift things in her life. And I was hooked. After that first appointment, I was really hooked. And, I've been doing the work for over 30 years now.
How could you not be hooked? I mean, when you had that that first appointment, but then her coming back 2 years later, I love
Yeah.
that.
And, you know, the chief of pediatrics there felt it was a really important service for parents, and also a great help for pediatricians because they didn't have a lot of time to spend with parents on the normal behavior problems. And I felt like, wow, so I was getting paid to do this amazing work. And then I went on to establish a monthly PD psych meeting so that there would be more collaboration between the two departments, which seemed really vital. And many times I realized that my work doing triage was really very valuable because I could help sort out who needed more intensive help.
Innovative. I mean, valuable, absolutely, but so innovative at that time. Good for you.
Yeah, and it's because I had the director of pediatrics who was willing to
Mhm.
try new things out, and the temperament program was amazing because it was this wide range of normal, and we didn't have to send people to mental health because we could help them with normal problems, and it was also a great tool for parents when they didn't agree on the approach to their child's behavior. So I could have parents focus on the child's temperament and not so much on a parenting style. So I found that parents really got a lot of help with whatever was going on in the family. So I loved my role as a temperament counselor. And I was really excited when Dr. Jim Cameron and I decided to do a pilot parenting series to see how we could use the temperament concepts in a class environment, because up
Mhm.
to then I was just doing it individually with people. And it was a really big success. And after that, we began to develop the parenting based temperament classes that Jan Crystal and Helen Neville and I worked on. And we disseminated it throughout Northern California. And I think I taught those classes for about 10 years.
Oh,
So,
wow. Oh,
yeah, that was
yeah.
my beginning.
Yeah, I love it. But you also hosted a radio show, right?
Yes, so I left Kaiser because I had this. It's a long story I won't go into, but I had an aha moment when I was teaching a class and a father stood up and said he realized he didn't want to hurt his child anymore.
Oh,
And I
wow.
realized that I needed to reach more parents.
Mhm.
And it took me a long time to figure this out, but I finally was able to get on the radio and have a show called Childhood Matters, where I could reach thousands of parents and talk about temperament on a regular basis. So that was a real blessing for me.
Oh, amazing. I just the idea of having thousands of parents and thousands of people in general hear about temperament. Ooh, that just makes me giddy and giggly. I love it.
And it was English and Spanish, so
Oh,
that was an extra added piece. And I wanted to reach people who didn't have access. That
mhm.
was the idea too, is like, who can come in to a doctor's office and get this kind of help, or
Yes.
now go online and get this kind of help. I just wanted to reach more people.
Okay, so that's a lot of people you reach. The next question might be tough, but can you tell me what you've seen temperament education do for family relationships? I'm sure you have hundreds of examples, but can you think of what just one example or a couple examples on why why temperament education impacts those family relationships and what have you seen? And it's so important that we keep this research coming because of that.
Well, first I saw that it was important for parents of infants, to do a temperament profile so they could watch this emerging temperament and really understand that what they were seeing wasn't necessarily anything to be really worried about. Like, I remember a parent telling me that she thought there was something very wrong with her baby because he cried so much more than her first child. And the concept of intensity was so important for her to understand. And she was able to get help with learning how to soothe her child instead of just freaking out
Yes.
and being fearful that there was a serious problem. And because I was a pediatric nurse too, I could help her understand that we always want to check out the physical problems. We want to make sure there's not anything wrong that we're missing. But understanding intensity, for example, it was so good that she could relax a little bit and enjoy her child and not feel like she was doing something really wrong. And
Yes.
for us at Kaiser in Richmond, California, there was no cost for the parents. And so I was part of a program where, finances didn't get in the way of parental support. And often, in terms of relationships, parents came to see me when their marriage was being stressed or their partnership was being stressed by
Right.
their child's behavior. And after a couple of meetings, they were able to see how important it was to find some common ground in their parenting style and really accept and appreciate their child's style and strengths. And a child, um, could be seen as so hard-headed. And then when we could reframe it and talk about this child being persistent, and then a parent could say, oh, right, it's just like me.
Yeah.
and and then look at the positive traits of persistence, as
Yes.
well as how persistence can be so hard on parents. But I saw that there was something magical about looking at temperament rather than looking at who's right and who's wrong in their parenting style. And then a mother, say, who's very sensitive to noise and also low energy, she was able to see that she didn't have to be the life of the party. She didn't have to feel bad if she just really wanted to go home and rest. She could accept herself. So again, acceptance is the key to the success of temperament counseling and such a vital part of parenting.
Oh,
And so,
absolutely. I love that
yeah,
word, acceptance. I'm going to write it. I'm going to write it big and bold and put it on a sticky note for, all the other interviews I do. Acceptance, temperament. Yeah. I love it.
it's
Thank you.
acceptance. And I would often think about like how we talk about diversity,
Mm,
how we want to accept differences in people,
mhm.
and based on race and culture and upbringing. There's so many ways, but temperament is another piece of that puzzle of wanting to really accept people. And then parents would come to me a lot because they were really yelling at their kids, and we know that yelling over time can be really hard on children. Again, it's something that is understandable, but it can be really hard. And so when I wrote the book, Is That Me Yelling? I wanted a big part of that to be about temperament so that parents can be less reactive and more proactive by understanding their kids' temperament. And that also helped reduce yelling.
Well, in the title alone, I know that, as I've done different consultations, whenever I talk about or I say the name of the book, all of a sudden their eyes light up and like they stop listening to me. They can't get to their computer, or their phone, or the internet fast enough to find it. So the fact that it's in 5 languages and, a current bestseller in China, that is something to be super proud of. And I'm grateful that that title is something that people can really, really, it resonates with them. Absolutely.
And it has to do with self-observation, that as
Hmm.
parents, we need to know ourselves and know what
Hmm.
triggers us, know our temperament, and understand our kids' temperament as well. Yeah.
Thank you. So, all right. Well, let's think about what other work others are doing in the field. And you've mentioned some people that you've worked with over the years. And so, as we look forward to the future, you know, what do you think that you are most hopeful for when it comes to the work that others are doing in the field?
What I'm really interested in is I think a lot about adverse childhood experiences and trauma. And I hope there'll be more research looking at how understanding temperament can be part of the resilience of children. We know that bad things happen to children. Unfortunately, they happen. But when parents can offer comfort and guidance, things turn out better. So I wonder how a parent's temperament and the fit with their children play a part in the repair and comfort that's needed after a traumatic event. So that I'm very interested in. And I'm always interested in the relationship between temperament traits and the diagnosis of ADHD. When I was at Kaiser in Richmond, I was on the best practice committee for ADHD, and I wore the temperament hat to always try and say, let's not pathologize this yet. Let's look at the wide range of normal. But we also know that certain temperament traits are sometimes a red flag when we know there's impairment and the child's struggling in school or at home. We need to look, is there more going on here or not? So I love the idea of more research in that field.
Absolutely. And just even that idea that temperament consultations could absolutely be part of that resilience when it comes to ACEs and adverse childhood experience. That is a fabulous idea. All right. So we've got some hope for the future, but let's talk about the future in general. One big idea for the future. What would that be from Nurse Rona?
Well, I could only hope that healthcare systems, like Kaiser has done, will value informing parents about temperaments. So I feel like pediatricians don't have enough training. They don't take advantage of this body of work. Medical students, pediatricians, they need to be trained in temperament. And, they probably learn it, one day in their training. And I would just love them to understand more how knowing about temperament can reduce heartache and keep parents from being disconnected to their children. So I would love to see more training and more healthcare systems taking on anticipatory guidance. Yeah.
Let's say it louder for people in the back, right?
Yes.
All right. So is there anything I didn't ask you that you were hoping I would ask?
Wow. Well, I just want to say before I answer that, how much gratitude I have to Dr. Jim Cameron for being my mentor. And what didn't you ask me? You didn't ask me all about my grandkids. No,
Yeah.
we don't have time for that.
But I do have a question. When you think about your grandkids' temperament, have you ever sat back and just smiled a great big smile like, oh, I got you?
Well, it's been so helpful to say, oh, right, he's intense, he's slow
Mhm.
adapting, he's persistent, he's perceptive. And, just watching the different temperaments of my grandkids has just been a joy. And it really keeps me grounded in loving their differences.
Appreciating and loving. Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Nurse Rona. This is Rona Renner, who has been joining us today. We appreciate you sharing so much of your insight and your thoughts and your true passion for temperament.
Yes.
So thank you so much. We appreciate it. And to those of you listening, join us again for Temperament from the Beginning.